All right. I think we're good. So many buttons to click. So many things to do before actually clicking the button that gets you live. Um, let's see. What do we have over here? 15 bajillion desktops because I just closed everything. Let's get rid of a few of those. This is the docs for Skein. This is Skein itself. I guess one of the cool things I could show off that I was working on before we really get into it today is I guess I don't have an application running. I need an application running first. Let's get the cargo run component tests. Example, component tests, experimental presets. This is really small for probably a stream. So I'm just running Skein's, demo applications examples with the experimental presets feature. Nothing super interesting there. Zune JPEG, isn't that a... Remember Zunes? Anybody remember Zunes? The little iPod competitor things. That's probably too old now. That's the decal stuff. Give this a second because I changed the features to render the decal demo because I recorded the Bevy 0.16 video yesterday. So I've been editing that and putting stuff into that. So this is an app that doesn't show anything because it's not supposed to. And if I go over to Blender, let's get the interface up here to like a 1.4 probably at least. So I'm going to grab the type registry from that application. I'm going to insert, I don't know, bloom on this cube doesn't make sense, but if I insert bloom, what happens now is you get all the defaults that are defined in Bevy for the component. So it is energy conserving, 1.0, high pass frequency, the intensity is 0.15. All these numbers that are like really annoying to like figure out. I haven't tried camera 3D. Is there a camera? Will camera 3D work, you think? No, I think there's something wrong with that. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what those numbers are supposed to be. I probably should have looked that up before using it. I think player has some defaults. So I have the defaults for player as like my name and then some random power, some random test value. Those are all over here. If I open up the test components, am I not allowed to do lib.rs? Lib.rs. This is the default implementation for player. It's getting served up from the Skein via BRP, via your Bevy app. So this Bevy app is just serving up this default information. I'm using reflection to get that default information. I think that's really cool, actually. But then there's like default implementations for a whole bunch of stuff, and those all work. Like any of the Bloom components or whatever inside of Bevy themselves. And then what was I going to look at? The component tests. I have to remove the snapshots folder from like the autocomplete and stuff. There's this additional API that I've defined here where you can insert a preset the same way you would register a type or do anything else with app. So you can insert a preset with a name. This is Luigi, the team member, name Luigi, Mario, whatever. And then team green, and this would show up inside of Blender is the idea. So you get defaults by default. If it implements default and it reflects default, which not everything does. You do have to reflect default like this, but using the regular stuff that is built into Bevy, that information gets served up and then used when you insert components inside of Skein, which is really cool because it's really annoying to figure out some of these values. I think one of them was point light people were trying to insert. Looks like that one might have an issue. This is an experimental feature, so I don't know exactly if everything will work or not. Let's see, does point light has a default implementation, right? Point light, go to the source, look for default. Default on point light is reflected. And then this is the implementation. So we should be getting these values, really. My guess is that the color is what stops it there. Basically, the implementation that I have currently is if there's an issue, then it just stops, but doesn't break your application. So if we fetch and then we insert, what was one of the ones that broke? Point light. Point light, we insert, it tries to insert as best it can. So you can see like effects light map, mesh diffuse worked. Then it probably hit this variant, this sRGBA, and hit an error of some kind. Yeah. So item attribute value, enum, effects light mapped, mesh diffuse, not found in sRGBA. So there's something off here about the way it deals with these enum variants, I guess. So there's stuff to work out, but overall, if it's something simpler, if it doesn't have variants in it, etc., then it just works. So all the infrastructure is set up, and now it's just kind of like edge case bug fixing. It's weird to get this there. I am actually curious as to why that exists like that. I don't know if this is what I want to work on stream, though. I just thought it was cool to mention. I don't think we can upgrade the game to 0.16 yet because specifically Bevy Tenua has declared that they aren't going to update their stuff until both oh damn, I've cleaned everything. I've been cleaning my directories a lot more lately. So I have to like do from scratch rebuilds more lately, which is interesting because usually I'm doing all incremental all the time, and incremental is super fast. But some of these projects I just like build as one giant crate and just keep slapping code into it. So yeah. But yeah, so I think that Bevy Tenua. This will get me a link to the repo, right? Repo. There is a pull request open. We could try to use this. This is on RC5. Actually, one of the reasons I know this existed is because they had an issue with RC4 with Skein. So this is like, it works, but the maintainer has explicitly declared that they are not going to actually merge anything until both Bevy releases stable and Avian releases stable. So I think that if that's the case in the future, since I do a lot of stuff during the release candidate, and I would like to upgrade things sooner rather than later, I might end up building my own character controller for future projects. I think Tenua is great, but I think I do a lot of like release candidate stuff, and I would appreciate like being able to update stuff. There's also some migration tooling that I haven't really shown off that much. For Skein. So if I, what should I do here? Let me close Blender. And if I dump this in, I think I already have a test file locally. Yeah, I do. So let's get rid of this test file. Delete. And then this looks for replace material.blend, which I guess I'm not in the assets directory, so I might need to actually assets replace material.blend. That should work. C dump component data. Notice we're running Blender from the CLI in the background. I'm just going to run that. It'll run some stuff headlessly with Blender and dump out this file. This file doesn't look like it actually has anything. Hey, are we talking upgrade today? So if we're going to upgrade, I want to upgrade. I want to upgrade the game. The only dependency that we really have that doesn't upgrade currently is Bevy Tenua. There's a potential that we could just use whatever branch this is. I believe, if I remember correctly, this is the same person that made the pull request for 0.15. No, maybe somebody else did. Or maybe they had a fork and they didn't PR it. Somebody else PR'd it. I forget what it was. But you can see like migrate to Bevy 0.15 merged on December 12th. That's like 2 or 3 weeks after stable released. So unless I want to wait a month, then we'll be using this branch. I think that's the only blocker in terms of the game. Oh, right. I just moved it to the other screen. If we look at our cargo TOML, yada yada, Bevy Asset Loader has a release. We should check IS progress. I don't think we actually use the progress tracking for loading. Like, we don't have like a loading screen or anything. That's something that we should do at some point. Perf UI got a 0.15 release. I don't know if it got an RC. We don't really need it. We could disable that for now. Avian has a RC5 compatible release. Tenua does not, so we would need to kind of get rid of our character control setup or try to use that branch. Hopefully the branch works. It says it's updated to RC5. I don't know. Inspector eGUI, I think, also has an RC5. Leafwing is interesting because for a couple of reasons, actually. We'll get back to it. And then Skein has a 0.16. One of the interesting things in general is that we probably need to... Oh, I forgot we stuck that cube there last stream. We should probably get rid of that. I think the Skein stuff is interesting from the perspective of... I don't think anybody has done an upgrade from like a Bevy version to a Bevy version. I don't think we're using anything that would matter. If we do the... So if we pull Blender up over here. Well, actually, if we don't pull Blender up, if I go back to the thing that I was showing off before I started answering this question. So you cannot read file, assets, replace material.blend. That is, oh, that's in the art directory. That's one of the ones that I failed. Okay, so let's look at replace material in replace material. The directory. So if I do replace material, I think that I am just getting this wrong. Skein assets, replace material, blend. I guess I need to go into the art directory. We need the Blender file, not the GLTF. This is a tool to work with Blender files at the moment. I think doing it on GLTFs is also interesting. So let me get rid of some of these tabs so that I can make things a little bit more obvious. I have so many tabs open. But this is the output that you get from that command. So it shows you for everything in your Blender file, all of the objects, all of the materials, all of the meshes, all of the lights, all of the everything that you could put something on. It will dump out, like, here's a camera. It has depth pre-pass. It has normal pre-pass. It has bloom with some settings on it. I've got a couple of materials in this one. This is the replace material example. So I expect to have two components for the materials. So this is the debug material with a use debug material component. And this is the force field material with a couple of things that are like required for the force field to work. And we can do this with anything. So I think if I go over here, we should have, this will be the first test on something that isn't just like a test blend file. If we run the Blender command and we do art misc1.blend, I think is what we want. And we're going to dump it to misc1 bevy 15 components.json. And looks like there are some interesting warnings here. I don't know. Invalid driver. I don't know if there's any impact on the drivers doing this headlessly. So I don't know. I don't know if these are actual issues because it doesn't give me any way to figure out what object that's on, which is interesting. X length 0 definitely looks weird. Because, like, if you go into the avian, collision, collider, constructor, cuboid, you would expect X length to be a value, not X length 0. So I think that's actually invalid. But it doesn't tell me what object that's on. So maybe we can figure that out. Maybe we should figure that out before we do an upgrade. But this is every component then that is used inside of this project. So we end up with a barrier element that has a rigid body and a collider constructor with some values. Same thing, barrier 1, barrier 2. I expect the barriers to all be the same. Here's the crate root, the thing that we can pick up and hold. It's got some out of bounds behavior. It's a target. It's got that color reveal thing on it. I think this is something worth checking. So, like, the reason this output exists is it's step 1 of doing migrations for reflection-based data, right? Because all of this data is based on the data format that Bevy accepts in terms of what it can instantiate, the full paths like tend to matter. So if we go to docs.rs, we go to avian 3D, and we look for this path, or I guess we can't look for the entire path. Collision, collider, constructor, collider, constructor. So avian 3D, collision, collider, collider, constructor. Avian 3D, collision, collider, and then it's in constructor. So it's not actually where it's re-exported from. It's the original path, which is also a little bit weird because that's this file. Avian 3D, collision, collider, constructor.rs, and then the type. Whereas if you look at this in the docs, avian 3D, collision collider, and then constructor. So there's got to be constructor in this file, right? Or something like that. I don't know exactly why there's a constructor on that. I don't know where that module path comes from. But this is one of the things that's like a little bit awkward about the reflection information in general. Because this is like an enum, collider from mesh. This is the alleged path that we would import it from. So where does constructor come from? A usual solution to this is to register your structs with an ID, UUID, and use that when serializing and deserializing. You mean a usual solution to that in Bevy? Or like a usual solution to this generally speaking? Yeah, so we are relying on Bevy's reflection format, right? This is directly speaking Bevy's reflection format. And to be clear, we don't have a problem yet. What I'm doing is trying to figure out if we would have a problem, so to speak. Or if there's anything that raises like red flags about needing to update those paths. For our purposes, I haven't really built the migration tooling yet. So the reason I'm looking into exact paths and stuff like that is because I'm not expecting people to upgrade from 15 to 16 with Skein right now. I'm expecting people to start new with 16, if that makes sense. But for 16 to 17, we're going to have that migration tooling. So understanding what's going on is going to be important. So collision, collider, constructor. See, it's in the constructor file. That's why this path is collision, collider, constructor. I don't know offhand why it shows that collision collider source, and then it's in the constructor file. So it must be getting re-exported from collider. Where's mod? There's mod. This is collider. We're in the collider file. So we should have constructor. Yeah, pub use constructor, and then these get re-exported. So that's cool in some respects because it means that these can get re-exported from anywhere and it doesn't matter. So like just re-exporting isn't enough to break these paths. But it does mean that you can't like, now you can't look at the docs and know what the path is. Because if you look at the docs and you read this, that's not the path. The path is the original source location, not the re-export in the location in the docs. The other thing is that we would need to translate this back and forth. I guess that's one of the things you were saying, right? Register your structs with an ID, UID, and use that when serializing, deserializing. Yeah. We would have to do that for everything. I don't think we can do that for third-party crates, like you were saying. So, like, to have a UUID that is static, it also feels weird to like predetermine UUIDs for everything in the ecosystem. Like it's unlikely that they'll collide, but they could collide. Whereas the module paths guaranteed to not collide, right? But yeah, the reason this data is formatted in this way, the reason it has the full file path is that this is the identifier when it comes to Bevy's reflection infrastructure. So if you take this and you put it as the key and this section as the value, then you get a component instantiated in Bevy. If we do anything extra over that, especially in Skein, then we're kind of just adding extra indirection. And one of the things I've tried to avoid with Skein is too much separation from what's actually going on. Because the more levels of separation that we introduce between what the reflection is actually doing and like our implementation, the harder it will be when changes get made to upgrade that. And our abstractions could potentially break in those cases, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why this kind of tooling that I'm showing off here is starting to exist, right? The process here of looking at this going, okay, this is Bevy 15 game. I'm probably going to change the name of the project, right? Maybe I leave it. Maybe I don't. I think upgrading this to 16 is definitely not what I intended to do. I kind of intended to do a 3-month cycle on this, a 3 or 4 month cycle, and then kind of like drop it. I think upgrading is still interesting. You'll be all right when Bevy reaches 15.0. I'll just keep working on this game for the next 5 years, 5 to 7 years, right? And then when Bevy actually, this is a terrible level, by the way. The thing that's supposed to be blocking is just never blocking. Yeah, I'll just keep it going for. I'm just pre-producing the game. Oh, that's an interesting bug. That I've never seen before. Does that happen if we keep? Yeah. That's super interesting. Was that because the player? Yeah, that's because the player respawned before the cube. Is that what happened there? I think so. I think because the player is holding the cube, if the player hits before the cube does, which only happens if it's kind of like below you and you jump onto it, right? Like this. Ugh. If I can do it. Can't play my own game. Then you can end up with the player spawning first and potentially a second collision event for the cube. I wonder if that's actually what's going on there. I mean, it's not really like a problem, so to speak. Oh, there we go. That's interesting. I think it might just be messed up from the first time still. Like this may not be. That's really interesting, actually. Something to do with parenting and where it spawns and the transform being applied. Anyway, that's not super important. It's clearly a bug, but let's see. Platforms, these won't change, right? These are all ours. Rigid body, I assume that rigid body and like angular velocity haven't changed paths. So the only thing that we really have been using third party wise is avian in components. So we don't really see any other like third party pathings in here. So we have control over basically everything. I think collider constructor doesn't move. You just joined. Can you quickly explain what the JSON you showed before does? Is something generated by Skein to map from GLTF properties of Bevy components for installation? This is a debug view. So this is, to bring it back, one of the things that, because we have a 0.15 game, we use the reflection information from Bevy and the format that Bevy wants. That means that we need full module paths to the components that we use for that data. What that means is that if a third-party crate decides to change that module path for whatever reason, or Bevy tries to change something that we used, these module paths can be invalid. If you do like a 15 to 16 upgrade, or like a 16 to 17 upgrade, or like an Avian 2 to 1.0, or like something like that, you know? But only if these paths change. So with that in mind, and with the idea that, for example, there are other things that you would want to do. So like Bevy 15 game is the name of the crate of the game that we're currently making, and hold point is a component in that. So if I wanted to move hold point into a different directory, a different module, if I wanted to rename the crate, which is something that, like, if we're going to upgrade this from 15 to 16, then it's not really a Bevy 15 game anymore. It's just the game I started when Bevy 15 was around. So to that end, to answer what this is the beginning of migration tooling for that. So the way we generated this is when you install Skein, one of the things it will do, one of the things it does in development right now, because I have it locally, is it adds its own CLI commands to Blender. So you can now run Blender in the background against a specific Blender file, blend file, with the command that Skein has added, and give it arguments to that command, because I'm using like Python's argparse inside of it, to render out this file. And what this command is doing, I can actually show you the code. Not that it's super important, I just like pointing to it. Dump component path. So this is the CLI tool. Literally all this is doing is accepting the command, doing some argument parsing, and going through every object and dumping out some information for every object. That's this code right here. So you can see this is like a less than 100 line script to get this data. And it just dumps out type path and the data that's associated with it for every component, for every object in the entire Blender file. The reason that's interesting is because now we can actually like read that in some reasonable way. I haven't written a script to actually do this yet, but actually maybe I have. Let's see, open. This from JSON. So let's start here. So we open this JSON file with new shell, right? Yada, yada. Object has 47 rows. So we've got like 47 objects with components on them, 3 meshes, 7 materials. And in this case, we didn't do anything to the camera's lights, and we're not using collections. So some easy information there, right? So if we get object, for example, we can end up with all of this data. Now, all of these names inside of a blend file are intended to be unique. So we're using them for that purpose. This is according to the Blender docs, this isn't necessarily true. Like, there are ways you can force things to be the same name and whatnot. But the intent is that everything in a blend file has a unique name. And that's why everything has .001.002. Because if you ever create something with the same name, Blender will auto increment that number and create the name. So that's why we have so many like platform rounded object 001, etc. Because we have all of those nodes. So if I always forget the syntax for this. I guess we can't really flatten this. Get object, components, each. It pipe get components. Flatten, does flatten work? Flatten works. Get type path, sort, unique. These are all of the unique components we use on all of our objects. So if you use JQ or something, whatever, this is every component that we've applied to any object in our entire blend file. So if we want to do some kind of upgrade, we now know which module paths we actually have to care about when doing that upgrade, which is a great reduction. I don't know if you've ever looked at the number of components and stuff or number of types in a type registry. The number of types in total is like hundreds. Like we're talking like 300 to 500 for this game right now. So we've broken that down to 13, of which 4 of them are foreign, right? So we have control over these. We don't need to worry about them. We don't need to like rename them or anything. And these are the ones, so we need to check 4. In the future, I want to be able to do this kind of thing automatically, which is why this is the first step. So the first step is getting like, here's all the components we're using. Second step is compared to maybe a file that you dumped out of the first game, compare it to the registry of the second game and determine which of those like don't exist in both places, that kind of thing. That'll be later. The other thing is like, I want to be able to run these scripts. Where's the Blender script? So I want to be able to let people run it like this or in their blend file. I think this is a little bit better. But like maybe back up the misc1.blend file, run this script on it, rename Bevy 15 game to Bevy 16 game, and then like reopen the blend file with the new registry and be done, right? This is all doable like outside of the blend file. So I think it's important that it's able to be done outside of the blend file. Specifically because if people start using multi-blend file workflows, if they start using libraries and library overrides and things like that, then it becomes really important to be able to do that all like in batch. Rather than like incrementally or whatever. Because if you start doing things incrementally, you start ending up like needing both registries around in the file at the same time, things like that. So I think like you could run this on a series of blend files, change them all at the same time, check the data output again, and like that could just be a script that you have. And then we could actually script 0.15 to 0.16 upgrades, right? So in the future, one of the things we could do as part of a release candidate is actually ship a Skein script that is like, hey, if you're only using Bevy core stuff, here are the things that changed. Run this script on your blend file and it should be good to go, right? Notwithstanding third-party libraries and stuff like that. But I think that giving people the tools to be able to write additional code like that would work. And then like if you have some special need or whatever, all of this code is open source. So if you wanted to write your own Python script, you can run your own Python script against this stuff. I think that dumping things out as JSON makes a lot of sense because it means that people can do things like the stuff that I just did here, where like, okay, the actual information that I care about is what is the total set of components that I'm actually using. And I just wrote like a simple new shell script offhand. I always forget the for each syntax, so I'm surprised I got that right the first time. But like if you were using JQ or JIQ or something, you can do like investigation of the data that you actually put into your game and how it relates to like whatever is actually in your Bevy application. Now, one of the things I didn't do is There's also material and mesh. So I think these are all basically the same, right? I don't think any of these are going to change from avian to avian. One of the nice things is that like sensors are a thing that just has to exist in avian. So like, unless there's a giant refactor going on, those are pretty stable. So we shouldn't have any issues, actually. We actually don't need to do any work to upgrade for these paths and stuff. And it's nice to have been able to guarantee that using this script and whatnot. So that's what the JSON file is. Because we were looking at this going, okay, what's going to be a problem if we upgrade? And realistically, the things that are going to be a problem are Tenua. I think everything else, hopefully I committed everything here. What are the chances I have like actual changes? GD, let's clear GD. Okay, so pick center, that's white space. This also looks like white space. That looks like unfortunate white space change because I wanted those to be formatted, but oh well. They reformatted my Sobel filter logic. It's fine, whatever. None of that actually changed. That's just white space. Then I removed bmesh extras for the final time, so we never needed that weird serialization stuff we were doing. The code we removed right here is the reason Skein exists. So it's really nice to like, this is like 10 lines of removal and it doesn't look that interesting, but this is the final removal, so to speak. Everything is in Skein now, which is great. I love that. There's a scene instance ready here that I have commented out. That looks like operating for the platforms. The platforms also, I think, completely in Skein at the moment, so that's all good. Goal event changes all the time, but we change this to be multiple levels. So it starts at 2, goes to 5, goes to 6. So I think all this is good. All this is fine. Let's commit this. I don't think we have any other code that we need to commit. Pre 0.16 upgrade. So really the thing here is going to be that if we upgrade, we are not going to have character control. We didn't talk about it earlier, but the other thing we do need to look at is Leafwing. And Bevy enhanced input. So there are two things going on here. One is Leafwing still exists. It has a 0.16, I think, compatible release, but it doesn't have maybe RC5. There were some issues between, let's say between RC3 and RC5, right? RC4 is something that I consider broken, especially due to the way that it broke logging. But RC3 is viable, RC5 is viable. And Bevy platform support was renamed to Bevy platform. And that was an RC4 to 5 change. We kind of tried to sneak that in before the release because there's no reason for this to be such a long name. It wasn't released in 0.15, so this is like a pre-16 change. This looks... I don't know why they removed must use from all of this. That doesn't make sense. That seems like an unrelated behavioral change. So Leafwing up to date was RC5. We could use that branch if we want to. We could clone it locally and change it if we want to. But we might, and I don't know if they have a 0.16 compatible version. It looks like they might. RC5 looks like compatible. We might just want to move to a different crate. I'm not going to say Leafwing Input Manager is dead by any means. It's still being like maintained and updated. But Bevy Enhanced Input is a collaboration between the maintainer of Leafwing, or at least one of the maintainers, Alice, who also is, getting paid to work on Bevy, and then somebody else in the community from Project Harmonia, which is why this isn't in the Project Harmonia organization. And they are working on this with the intent to make this something that can then be eventually upstreamed, I believe. So the reason we would move from Leafwing Input Manager to Bevy Enhanced Input is that this is kind of like the next generation of the thing. The people who built the previous things are now working on this and collaborating on this. So it makes sense if we're going to do something new, or if we're going to have to consider doing new things, that we would move to this. Now, to be clear, I don't know how to use this crate yet, so we would be figuring that out together. But it might be a good opportunity to, because if we get rid of our character controller, then we will need to actually do some character controller code. So if we can get the upgrade done, then maybe we play with Bevy Enhanced Input today a little bit. And just see how it goes. It looks like they have, they have a 0.16 compatible release because there's an RC5 up with V10. So we should be good. So let's start figuring out, let's dock stuff for Skein. Let's get rid of this other Bevy app that's running there. Yeah, I think let's start checking dependencies. Bevy Asset Loader does, we will need Bevy 0.16.0 RC.5. We will need Bevy Asset Loader, which I don't know if Bevy Asset Loader is on crates.io. It might be. Let's go check. What window manager thing am I using? I'm using Yabai. There's a new one that people seem kind of interested in as well, but I've been using Yabai for years at this point, and I really like it. So the thing that I really want is binary space partitioning. That's my big highlight feature. So whenever I create windows, this happens. So you'll notice that I never have a stack of 20 windows behind each other. And that's because I use this. I forget what the name of the other one is. It's Aero, Yabai versus Aerospace, I think, is the new one. I haven't checked this out at all, but I've been seeing people kind of gravitate towards this as a newer thing, but they aren't 1.0 yet either. So, it looks like they have their own emulation of virtual workspaces, which is interesting. So, yeah. That's what I use. That's something, either Yabai or Aerospace is kind of what I would look for. Let's see, Bevy Asset Loader. Bevy Asset Loader. I know they have a Git release. I don't know if they have. RC3 might not be enough. Again, the RC345 sequence was a little bit awkward in terms of support. Is this Bevy main for them right now? see, bump RC version 3 days ago. Hopefully this is okay. RC3 for them does not match up with the RC. So we should be good to just use this. IS progress, I'm assuming, let me get rid of the intermediary windows here since we're just going to keep going back and forth. IS progress, I think, has to be out for asset loader to go. So 014 RC1, I think 26 days ago. Probably all good. Yeah, 16 RC, perfect. So IS progress in. Perf UI is something that we should check. I guess IS progress, what was the version on IS progress? I didn't look at it, did I? We got to actually look at the versions of the things. Progress will be 14 RC1. And then we need Perf UI might not, Pref UI, that's not what I wanted. Perf UI might not have a release. Perf UI is kind of like a extra thing. Like it's a thing that we don't really even need. So I'm just going to comment it out. I'm going to rip grep for IS perf. I probably already have this commented out functionally. So in dev, we have IS perf UI prelude. We'll get rid of that. I do have it commented out functionally. I actually don't like running this all the time because for the most part, I am working in debug and like frame rates and stuff and debug don't really mean much to me. So usually I have this off anyway, and I only bring it up when I'm trying to check. So that's perf. Progress. Avian, I don't think Avian has a release. I think Avian's going to be GitHub. So let's go and check first. Yep, Avian's going to be GitHub. Which is fine. I think they have it. I think main is something that I've been working with Avian for a little bit now. God, I wish I could access this full hash without having to like navigate to a new page and then like try to find it. You know? Like I wish GitHub was a code hosting tool and not whatever the hell they're trying to do these days. So git equals this and rev equals this. I think we don't need git on the end of this. I don't know. It'll yell at us. So Bevy Chinua and Bevy Chinua Avian 3D both getting commented out because they don't. Bevy Inspector eGUI. That's last month. I think Bevy main or a PR. I forget which. It's 2 years ago. I think it's in a PR. Here's 16. 3 weeks ago. I think this is up to date. Oh, Bevy eGUI changes? Maybe we just get rid of this for now. I don't really want to debug Bevy Inspector eGUI like pull request branch level issues. So let's just make sure that we aren't importing this. It doesn't look like we are. That feels weird. I feel like we were using, oh, you know what the issue is? I actually just talked to my friend about this. They were publishing their first crate. And if you have a crate that has dashes, it will automatically underscore it for the crate name. So this is the package name on crates.io. This is the crate name inside of, you know, the way you use it and whatnot. So something to look out for, I think, if you're publishing to crates.io is I would probably publish with underscores in general. Should probably stick these behind features too, instead of just like commenting them out. But for now, largely doesn't matter. This is allow dead code, perf UI entries. We'll just get rid of this because we got rid of the import. So this dev plugin is effectively just going to do nothing at the moment. I'm okay with that. Leafwing input manager, iter tools, Serday. I guess we bump Serday to the most recent at some point. Maybe not right now. Probably when we cargo update, it'll just update for us. We probably don't need the specific version of Serday there. Non-max will need, there's some shader update code that I would like to do. There's a mesh tag now. I kind of have a userland version of mesh tag. So it would be nice to upgrade that. And then Bevy Skein needs to be 0.2.0. RC2 or 3. Can't even remember which RC version I'm on for my own crates. Skein. RC2. It was only 4 days ago, too. It's not like that was, 3 years ago. Okay, so we mostly have our updates gone. Leafwing is the last one. I don't know, because we just got rid of our controller code, I don't know that even upgrading Leafwing is what we want to do. So let's check out what it's doing in level spawn, right? Input manager bundle. So we're inserting it on the player. We are going to have to get rid of the Tenua stuff. We haven't gotten rid of Tenua yet. So I guess we start with Tenua. Tenua's in level spawn and controls. So let's start with Leafwing, Tenua. I don't know if that's the way you pronounce that, actually, now that I think about it. And then I think this is only on the player. So Tenua Avian 3D will be a bunch of this kind of stuff. We can leave the rigid bodies because those will be available in Avian. And then we'll get rid of the Tenua controller, the sensor shape. Shapecaster can still exist, but I don't know what we're going to use it for per se. I think actually the Shapecast is for picking up objects. I should know that. Input manager bundle is from Leafwing. We're going to get rid of that too. And then controls is the other obvious place where we will have like control stuff. This whole thing is going to have to get either rewritten or in some way dealt with. So these are all Tenua things. So let's get rid of all of these, Tenua and Leafwing. And then apply controls probably also get rid of. Handle, pan tilt. I want to say that we're also using that for all of this stuff. So the only thing that we really probably aren't using input for is the camera rig to the player. So we're going to end up getting rid of quite a bit of this, but I'm just going to comment it all out just to be kind of, because we're going to have to rewrite the controller code anyway, right? So having some stuff commented out in the meantime is not that bad. So target camera to player, apply controls. We'll have a different apply controls at some point. And then leaf wing, level spawn controls, main. Why is it in main? Input, action. Here's action. Raycast player. And throw held item. So we won't be able to interact with anything. We won't be able to move our player around. We are going to have to rewrite both of those things. Throw held item, also looking for a action. So also looking for that player input. So these things have to go. And then I think that's it. I think that's everything we need to do. Avian, Git, Bevy, asset loader, IS progress. Leafwing we're getting rid of. Itertools, Cerde, non-max, Skein. So fairly low load in terms of number of crates. I think that Bevy, obviously always going to be in a Bevy game. One thing you can do here is split this up into different crates. I typically don't do that. I use the core Bevy crate. I do that for libraries. Bevy asset loader, really useful crate. Something that is also updated for release candidates quite often. So have no problem depending on that. IS progress, probably, if I had to guess, updated by the person who maintains Bevy asset loader, but might also be updated by the core maintainer. Either way, these two things have a dependency on each other. If Bevy asset loader is out, progress is out. So totally cool with that. Avian has been pretty good about doing updates in recent memory over the last 2 versions or so. So very happy to keep using Avian here, especially for release candidate level stuff. Skein is my own thing. If it doesn't update, it's my fault. And then Leafwing updates, but it doesn't seem to be the thing we want to use moving forward. And Tenua kind of doesn't update until a couple weeks after the stable release. So given the pace at which I typically do work, if I was building a game that I was intending to work on for 2 to 4 years, I wouldn't have a problem with this. But because I do so much stuff with the release candidates, because I like to upgrade my things very early, this becomes like a month or 2 delay on being able to upgrade the game. So maybe we build our own character controller in the next cycle. I'm starting to think like maybe a game and one significant project is good. So like last cycle, it was this game and Skein, which solved a significant problem that we were having with building the game. And then maybe doing a character controller with our 0.16 game would be interesting. TBD. So let's do cargo update. Failed to select a version for IS progress. So there's no Bevy asset feature in IS progress anymore. My guess is that we're not really using that at the moment. Or that is a built-in feature now. So I will just do this. Cargo update. We were able to resolve versions for everything. So that's a good sign. At which point we can start with a cargo run. And this is going to do the big build. This is the everything is invalid. We changed all of our dependencies. We have one Git dependency, so we'll need to fetch from Git, and then everything else is on crates.io, which is good. This is actually significantly less Git dependencies, or significantly fewer than we've had in the past. Oh, I need more water. I've probably locked myself into contention with Rust Analyzer, having changed all of this. So let me stop Rust Analyzer for a second. And then immediately our cargo run builds. Funny how that works. When there aren't two things competing for control of the target directory, one of them can actually run. I keep saying I'm running into this problem more and more recently. I think I wasn't running into it as much in the past. I think the other thing that I've figured out for myself is that I want to always have a cargo workspace for my Bevy games. I think I always want a workspace. If I'm doing like a small demo or something, fine. Doesn't need to be a workspace. But I think for my own purposes, when I'm building a new game that I'm going to spend a couple months on or more, I want it to be a workspace for a variety of reasons. So far, so good. I'm going to let this compile and grab some water. And hopefully this will build by the time I get back. Always nice when the Rust compiler forces you to get up from your desk and walk around a little bit. That's a joke. One of the other things that would be cool, we don't do a lot of audio on stream. But I think in the next cycle, I would like to do some. I think that Bevy Seedling is getting to the point where it can actually be used. So I think I would like to start using it. I think that this is coming out of the Bevy audio working group. So if there's something wrong with this, then giving feedback to that working group is good. So I think that doing this in general, is a useful thing. Is there an RC out? No, I think we'll have to wait for an RC to come out. But I would think I want to use Bevy Seedling this cycle. Ooh, there we go. Yeah. Okay, so now we're getting into actual things that we can do for upgrades. So far, we've got... Ooh, we've got rendering issues. That'll be interesting. I might just disable that. Got hook changes. I need to get rid of something in level spawn. So this is input map, right? Here's spawn player input map. This is where we put our like input control stuff. So if we're going to get rid of Leafwing, we have to also get rid of this. We have to change some hash map imports. Okay, let's start with this import. Level spawn 16. Controls action. That's something we need to get rid of. That doesn't exist anymore. Indirect parameters buffer. This is going to be rendering stuff in section texture. Section texture could be something that we upgrade separately, actually. Interesting that I'm seeing issues here because I thought I already upgraded something that was doing the section texture stuff. And I didn't think anything made it into the new RC, but maybe I was wrong. This is section texture stuff. We're going to ignore section texture stuff for the second. We'll probably do that upgrade in the other application and then come back and finish it here. Apply controls in controls. This is again related to our removal of controls.rs on 26. Oh, before apply controls. Okay, that makes sense. It was off screen. Section texture hash map, that will have to change. We'll put our comma here. Section texture, section texture, section texture, section texture. Long time. Hey, Hukasu. It's good to see you again. You've been doing a bunch of stuff with the rendering refactor and stuff. Do you feel like that's going well? Rendering stuff. Never warm param might not exist anymore. Let's go to camera. Never param worn. I guess we removed this. Let me check. One of the things that I do like to do is if I don't recognize the change, I don't just make the change. I go check why or when. Looks like there was an issue. Renamed. So this was renamed to ignore param missing. When was this merged? On January 11th. Interesting. So never param worn. I think we have that on 26 as well. In controls. Input map we just got rid of. That's the Leafwing stuff that we're not going to use anymore. Materials, the component hooks have changed. On add, use goal materials. So this component hook function signature changed. It's now like mute world and hook context, if I remember correctly. The explorations, it has a very strong Hukasu mentality. Probably will have one or two ideas used on the proper impulse. Ah, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I've been seeing you basically be really active in the rendering channel and stuff, especially relating to kind of the refactoring that people are thinking about doing. It feels like as soon as 0.16 goes out, 0.17 is going to have a huge crate split up for rendering. And then people are going to start trying to push Weasel harder and harder. and we're going to end up with like a complete crate refactor plus Weasel, plus whatever else goes into rendering for 0.17, which is going to be a lot of rendering changes. Component for deferred world. Yeah, this is not the right function signature. I forget exactly what the function signature is. I think it's hook context, but let's go check. I guess we could check the migration guide. That's probably something that I should be showing people how to do. I don't know that the migration guide is publicly accessible. I mean, it's publicly accessible. I don't know that it's linked to at the moment since there's no release yet. But learn, bevyengine.org, learn migration guides 15 to 16. And then what was the thing that I was looking for? Hook. This one. Refactor component hook parameters into hook context. Function signature changed. Hook context is plain data with all public fields. Perfect. Easy change for us. This is going to be this. We don't use these two, so I'm just going to dot that. I think this is not the only usage of a component hook that I have in here, but it is maybe the only one in this file. There's 97. This one also. Oh, it's linked on Learn Migration Guides. Very cool. Nice. I didn't think we put this out until the release went out. But I guess we've been pointing more and more people to it during the release candidate phase. So it makes sense that it's now like publicly linked. Section texture, these are going to change into target. So these are .entity. But I'm not going to touch that file just yet. I want to see all of the issues just exist in that file before moving on. Despawn recursive and lib. That's now recursive by default. I love this change, honestly. This is... I never found myself writing despawn. I always found myself writing despawn recursive. So I love that it's now recursive by default. Trigger.entity. And I'm just going to select all of the existences of that in this file and do target. So triggers had a name change months ago at this point. Okay, so I think the only things that we have left here are things that are related to the section texture stuff, which is like important, but not, oh, I didn't import hook context. There we go. We should do that. Rust analyzer start server, restart server. There we go. I think the way that I want to do the upgrade for the section texture is actually make the changes in the Bevy examples repo first, and then come back and take the changes that we applied to it and put them here, because they're basically the same thing. And this gives me the opportunity to update the examples directory and update the game itself. Did I do the Rust Analyzer really chugging today? All right, where's the compiler error message? There we go. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I haven't restarted VS Code in like 3 months. That'll do it. It don't VS Code only updates when you reboot it, and I never reboot VS Code. So I think there was an issue with Rust Analyzer that might currently be fixed. And I just don't have the updated version of it because I never update VS Code. Okay, avian collision is interesting. So that's lib.rs. This is the collision event reader. This is actually really interesting because this is very, very, very new. And by very, very, very new, I mean it got merged yesterday. So this PR is cool because it means that we can write code like this now. So if you spawn something or whatever, you can now observe collisions with that thing. So that's awesome. So I'm not super concerned with this function anymore because this is a detector for the goals. And now basically what I'm going to do is probably when we spawn in a goal, I will use that goal entity to insert an observer via the hook. So this whole function is probably going to go away. So I'll comment this out knowing that. Get rid of this knowing that. And then we have to get rid of it here. So we won't be able to finish a level, but we also can't control our character at the moment because we got rid of Bevy, Tenua, and Leafwing. So we got a couple of things that we are going to have to immediately start working on. Lib.rs. We do collisions somewhere else too. So lib.rs. Oh, for all the respawn stuff. That's cool. We'll replace it with this too. So this like respawn thing. We can match the behavior of the observer to the thing that is actually being spawned or respawned. So we'll do this too. We'll get rid of this and we'll switch to observers because this is like how do I frame this best? This is a once in a while, once in a like user triggered error kind of thing. It is not we're not spawning, 50,000 cubes and having them collide and use observers for the collision detection. This is like a cube hits a thing once every, 50,000 frames or whatever. So hash map, that's section texture stuff. I guess this is in lib. That is not the right position on the keyboard. Hash map is defined. Okay, it's not in rlib. That's pointing to where it is. It's in Bevy platform these days. This is the phase item stuff for the section texture. I think the rest of this is largely ignore parem missing not found. That's interesting. Let's go to the camera control. Why is this not found? Is there a trait we need to bring in? No. No method named ignore parem missing for this function. I thought that was something that we just looked up. That doesn't exist. Oh, maybe I looked at the PR and not the migration guide. Never param. Wait, is param warning not in the various systems validate param now return and accept an outcome? No, that's custom system param stuff. Global error handler. This might not be in the migration guide. Yeah, it's possible the migration guide doesn't have the PR. But I thought this was merged a while ago. Because this one was, for sure. Let me make a note of this. One place we can check is the website. I don't remember seeing a PR for this in the website. This is remove unnecessary migration guides. That's some stuff that's changed, but doesn't actually need to change. This is really what I'm looking at to see if the release notes are ready. Once this GPU-driven rendering release note merges, that's when I will know that 0.16 is going to get released. I don't see anything here, though, for that. This is the 2024 Never issue, the relationship stuff from child up to child. One of these is I think this one is the logging one. And then lightmap slab, non-vec data structures in, oh, is that undone? Interesting. Re-export entity set collections, yada yada. Why was it undone? Okay, well, we don't use that, so it's not super important for us. That's new stuff, so nobody's really going to be migrating it anyway. I don't think that, let's see, release content, 0.16 migration guides. There's nothing, type parameter, param, system param validation. And system param on a per system parameter basis. This is validate param and stuff. This is for single, which is, oh, param warm policy and with param warm policy have been removed completely. Okay, so they don't exist. Failures during system param are not handled via global error. Okay, I think that was in the migration guide, actually. Param. What was it called in that? Validate. No, this is param warm policy. Yeah. Param warm policy, which is the trait that those functions come from, doesn't exist anymore. So what are we supposed to do? Global error handler. Okay, so this is using single. Hopefully we don't start running into random panics. Hopefully. We'll see. We'll figure it out. We got to get everything running first. I think this is it. That was the set of changes other than the rendering stuff. And the rendering stuff is something that most people aren't going to have to deal with because in this game, I render a custom section texture using a custom phase item, which is not something that people do in general. So if we go from the bottom, we've got component hook change function signature. We have the removal of Bevy Tenua and Leafwing input manager. Sometimes you kind of wish that this speed was modifiable other than using page. I don't have a page up button, actually, now that I think about it. Space, there we go. Shift space. No, space is just sending us down. Why? I don't have a page up. FN? Nope. All right. We'll scroll wheel it. I need to figure out how to get a page up. I was thinking about getting a wider keyboard for Blender hotkeys anyway. So maybe I'll get a numpad or something. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And then we get into the lock file. So not too bad actually for the upgrade. The thing we do have to do now is go figure out the rendering changes. And because I have an example of doing this in the Bevy examples, which I don't think I merged. I think this is RC1 or 3, something like that. Let's check to make sure. Trying to be real good about having things up to date. So this is 16 updates from 3 weeks ago. So this is still on the Bevy 16 branch. So what branch are we on? We're on 16. I don't think I've pushed anything into it. I wanted to do animation clips for rotating column. I don't think I finished that. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Close all of these. There's only one example that I really want to upgrade right now. But to do so, see RC3, cargo run, example section, bin section texture. Edge detection is what I named it. Edge detection custom phase. So this is RC3. This should work. I guess we can update some dependencies here too. I'll just wait for Rust Analyzer to finish fighting. Because I think this example currently runs. So the changes that we have to make would have made it in between RC3 and RC5, which is relevant because that narrows down like the area of time that we need to look for PRs that affect the rendering stuff. And that kind of thing is always important, right? Like one of the things that I feel like I have a better time about compared to some other people, because I spend so much time looking at these PRs and getting them ready for This Week in Bevy and things like that, is that I have an understanding of like which PRs went in when and what has changed overall. Because I've literally seen every PR that's merged. Like the stuff that I talk about in This Week in Bevy is just a subset that I think people either need to know about, find interesting, or something that I just want to talk about. But I literally look at every merged PR, and I've looked at every merged PR over the last, I guess, full year now, which is not something that everybody else does. Probably Alice does that. So when thinking about like the range of time in which a PR could have merged, if there's a, you know, that's the problem right there. I can see it already. Bevy allies 0.15.1. Why? Does this have a specific? It does. Okay, cool. That's the issue. That's why I thought it worked. Okay. Let me do 0.15 in examples. That's a mess up on my part, is what that is. Tommel? T-Tommel? I can never remember. Star.tommel? Come on. Did I just remove the last one? No, I'm just not finding any files. Okay, so that works. I'm just making sure that that actually works. Okay, so we don't have any specifications of Bevy left in the other cargo tommels. I don't know why that one specifically didn't have it, but let's just do the upgrade then, because that means that this whole demo is something that I actually missed upgrading when I looked at it earlier. So let's do 2024 Bevy workspace, non-max, whatever, doesn't matter. Non-max is like a utility dependency. The cargo tommel will have 0.16 RC3. So let's bump this to 5. Let's do Bevy asset loader with the same version that we just pulled in for, not Skein, for the game. Just because we know that this is now available. Why this is all red, I don't know. Additional properties not allowed. License was unexpected? What? There's no way, right? Is that because I put it in the wrong spot? I guess I put it in the wrong spot. I think I put license at the top is all it is. I don't know why I put license at the top. I don't know why it wasn't, like, cargo must not care, but the even better Tommel extension that I have cares. I don't. That's one of those, that feels like one of those weird issues where, like, the even better Tommel extension must have a predefined notion of what a cargo Tommel file is, and it doesn't match up with what is actually true when cargo goes to parse the file. Also, I think we can be Resolver 3 now if we're going to bump to 2024, but I'll do that later. So the place we're going to look here is going to be inside of Bevy. Let's check the 0.16. The really, really, really relevant, because this is effectively just a implementation of the custom phase item example. This is basically whatever changes happen to this file are the changes that we are going to have to implement, which is cool because then we just get to look at the history here and be like, oh yeah, since January there's been 3 changes to this file. Those are probably the changes we're going to have to make. Even better Tommel shouldn't be exclusive to cargo Tommel, right? No. I was going to look at that, but I don't know that I care, is really what happened there. Extensions, even it's got a Ferris logo on it, so it doesn't seem to. Yeah, schemas can be associated with document URIs with whatever. So there's some schema store for this JSON that doesn't have like the same schema as what Cargo actually has. I don't know where the JSON schema store is, but shrug. Okay, so the things that we have to get done first, probably the easy stuff like hash map, right? But before we really get into making these changes, let me show what this is supposed to do in the first place. So here's the markdown preview of the document for the README. This is edge detection with section textures, which I should just make the video on. I was planning to do jump flood and then talk about this approach and jump flood, because jump flood is like really good and what most people probably want. And this approach is like a very art directed approach. It's what I would choose over automatic depth and normals and stuff like that. But it's basically like, if you go for the Sobel filter, depth, normals, color, whatever, however you do your filtering or whatever, this is the approach that would cover that topic. And then jump flood would cover the other topic. So this basically generates this. It generates it via an HDR texture. So all of these values are basically like blown out HDR values because we can't render, you know, greater than 1 red or greater than 255 red, right? So it uses the red channel. Anything that's pure white is going to be pure outline. Anything that's pure 0 is going to have nothing. There's just going to be nothing there. And that ends up with drawing these outlines around the places that you've defined, right? So you can see that on the left here. We've got a cube with no interior lines. That's because everything in the cube is the same color. And here we've got a cube with a 0 on one of the faces, and then other faces are also different from each other. You can see kind of see that here. So you end up with lines like that. And then we use effectively like a userland mesh tag or userland version of mesh tag to differentiate these between each other. So this is the way that it actually looks, right? When the data comes in, before we've turned this into like HDR data, before we've separated all these meshes by basically squashing all the data from 0 to 1, and then adding the mesh texture U32 to it, this is what it looks like. So you can see that this cube here has like a white surface that is all of the outline, and then the other faces are different. This cube, all the same. So anywhere you see differences here, outlines are going to show up. Anything between meshes, outlines are going to show up, etc. So that's what we're fixing here, since I didn't run it before. And this is a two-phase thing, right? We get the section texture rendering. So we take basically reuse all of Bevy's ability to tell us what meshes are going to render. We put all of those into its own render target, right? We get that red texture out, and that red texture gets put into the post process. So we actually don't have, as far as I can tell, any issues with the post-process code. It just doesn't use anything that changed, I guess. What we do have issues with is that first generation code. So trigger.entity, easy change. This has to be trigger.target. This is the thing that we're going to replace with mesh tag. This is basically just generating IDs for individual meshes. It's a really bad way of doing that. I just feel like this is using, I mean, like, I don't want to say it's like really bad because it works and it does it well enough, but this isn't like a good way of doing that. It's not like I would say, hey, you should go generate IDs like this. It's just something I needed for the effect. Mesh tag is going to be better. I feel like. But we do have to explore some stuff with mesh tag. I don't know if they're guaranteed. But anyway, this is basically generating an ID, adding one, generating an ID, adding one, whatever. So if you end up with doing this on multiple threads, you end up with like 2 2s or like 3 3s or something like that. But nothing really important. That's what the observer stuff is for. So we need to do hash map at the top somewhere. This is in... Actually, we're not going to have to touch hash map. Indirect parameters buffer looks like it changed. And then there's hash map. So let's do platform, I think is the... platform collections hash map. Of course, that's what I wanted. I wanted it to zoom off screen. So platform collections hash map. And then extra index looks like it has an issue. Sorted phase item has an issue. The mesh uniform arguments probably changed. This I saw in the error message earlier actually changed to be only the main entity, I think, which is fine because we actually don't use the other entity. Mesh uniform again, same change there. Get batch indirect parameters. I think I saw a PR. This is related to the indirect parameters buffer. So maybe this is just an argument change for us because I actually don't do anything here. And then the camera entity being wrong is interesting. Live entities, we'll have to look at this logic. This logic looks like it could be... This could be really easy. It could be just get the entity from somewhere else. And it could be an actual change. So TBD. Phase item, extra index. So this doesn't look all that bad. It could, for some reason, blow up in our faces, but for the most part, it doesn't look that bad. So let's take a look at the PRs. Actually, there's two things, right? One is we should probably just read the custom phase item example and take a look at what's going on here with the knowledge now of what kind of has changed. So one of the things that changed here is the visibility class. So interesting. How far do I have to go? Let me, there we go. I think this is going to be called section texture for us. This is a custom rendered entity, marker component that represents an entity that is rendered using custom phase item. I feel like I don't have that. Maybe I just forgot that I wrote it. Looking at the blame is also useful. Although this view on GitHub is not great. Also, they override Command F. Please don't override Command F. They override Command F because Command F doesn't work anymore. They broke it. They basically try to not show, like, this is a virtualized list of stuff. This isn't a it's one of the things that I don't like. I will stop ranting. Not that I was really ranting, but draw section. Make sure I'm looking at the right custom render phase and custom phase item. I think the render phase is actually what we should be looking at, because we don't actually have custom items. We have basically all of the items that were already there that we're reusing in a different phase. So we have a custom render phase. We don't have a custom render item or a custom phase item. So draw stencil. This is much more like what we have. You put draw stencil on stuff. We have draw section texture or draw section or something like that. This is trying to show off stencils, because stencils are something that, like, people don't really use in core Bevy all that much. So extract and sorted, those are good. All the things as usual. Initializing our pipeline stuff, draw functions, render commands, setting up the extract schedule. All of this is like semi boilerplatey. Like, it's stuff that means things, but it's not like if you're going to do it, you have to do it. So our first error is about indirect parameters buffer and the imports. So we don't actually see an error until the phase item implementation. So let's check the phase item. So in this case, it's just the clone. Is that true? Click, show blame. Certainly looks like it. Yeah. Was I not cloning that before? I wonder if that change made it in after I... Huh. Because when I wrote this, I basically backported it to 15. So sorted phase item, for some reason, has an issue. What is our issue? Our issue with sorted phase item is missing indexed implementations. So if we implement missing members using Rust Analyzer, we'll see indexed here. I don't know what indexed is, so we got to go check whether the mesh in question is indexed, that is using an index buffer in addition to its vertex buffer. I think our answer is going to be no, but maybe this is passed through. Looks like self.indexed is... What is going on, GitHub? Oh, man. I'm going to reload this page. It randomly scrolling is great. Wonderful. Wonder if they're using AI for the scroll. Sorted phase item. So we are going to pass through for the phase item. That makes sense to me because a lot of the stuff that we care about, which this probably doesn't exist on our struct currently, because the phase item for them is stencil 3D. So if we go look at stencil 3D, they're going to have something somewhere where this is defined. Or it's not going to be defined? Where does it come from? Init resource, draw, yada yada. There we go. What? I don't. GitHub is broken. Why do I even use GitHub? Why do I even use the website? I don't know. Okay. So there's Stencil 3D, right? So ours would be like section texture, I think. Sort key. Let's see the blame here. I keep removing blame, but this is from the original. I literally cannot. Okay, so I really want that blame information and stuff, so I'm gonna keep trying to use GitHub, but it's like randomly scrolling for some reason, and I have no idea why. Okay, so self.indexed here would be for section texture phase. Section texture phase for us is up here, so we need to add pub indexed here, which is just a bool. Right? I guess we'll copy the comment too, since the thing that I'm writing this into is very much meant as an educational resource. So I don't think that comment is necessary. Why would it do this? Just show me the file on the page, please. Like my hand is off keyboard. Okay, so self.indexed. Let's figure out why that isn't happy. Which I could probably do. I should probably look at errors in my editor more often. I'm kind of 50-50 on that being an actual error, though. Because I don't see it in the compiler output. I only see it in VS Code. So I think this might be a restart Rust Analyzer issue. It's not. And it doesn't even show me the error for the line that I'm on. There we go. Is it a function? No. Oh my God. Okay, I literally cannot actually use the GitHub website right now. I don't know why it's scrolling randomly, but I literally cannot actually get to the things that I want to actually see. So cool. Love when GitHub just doesn't work for the purpose that it's supposed to be built for. Struct does have an index field. I just added it. The thing that's making this tough for me is that I keep going back to GitHub. It keeps scrolling through the entire page automatically for some reason. So ours has this, assuming that I did the right thing. So Stencil 3D, right? Stencil 3D for them. We did indexed here. This is on sorted phase item, which I think, oh, that's the wrong one, actually. This is phase item. Phase item, extra index. We fixed that already. Sorted phase item, indexed. So I'm not sure why this is not a function here. I think there's something weird about Rust Analyzer picking this up at the moment. I don't actually think that's an issue. So I might just move on and fix the other stuff and come back to it. because it doesn't show up, as far as I can tell, in the cargo out. Oh, there it is. Attempted to take method, value of method indexed in section texture phase. Why is that a function? The other thing is, like, I could just slap this on it and like hope it worked or whatever. But that's not what I want to do. I want to understand why this error popped up. Because sorted phase item for section texture phase, right? Sorted phase item for stencil 3D. Sort keys, this is all going to be basically the same because we're doing basically the same thing, right? So these are both the same. This points to the indexed in stencil 3D. So for us, that's section texture phase. I wrote the wrong word. So you were right. It was not an indexed field. I mistyped and I wrote indexes. I think I was just getting frustrated with GitHub and I didn't notice. You know, what I should really do is learn how to use Maggot better. And then this is, those are errors for something else. Let me remove that for a moment if I can. Where's the spacecraft one? Spacecraft, we don't care about spacecraft for the moment. This is everything. So let's just run our bin. See, unused manifest key workspace license. I guess license doesn't exist here. I don't know. I don't want to put it in every single, you know, whatever. But that's wild. Did I just drop 50 dependencies? What just happened there? I took one crate out of the workspace graph and it decided that it wanted to rebuild 50 crates. Starting with crossbeam? If I cared more, I would look into that. That felt really weird. Maybe that was a Rust analyzer competing with kind of situation. Okay, so indexed is good. We don't actually have an issue there. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. License is part of package and not workspace and not floating. I think I'm going to leave it there anyway and let the warning. I didn't change from RC3 to RC5 since my last recompile. Right. When I was running into the indexed issue because I wrote indexes. That was the same compile set. That was also RC5. So I don't know exactly why that triggered. I removed one thing from the cargo toml. So I could have triggered some kind of, dependency graph reanalysis. Does BlendV work for 0.15 now? I think that the state of BlendV is that there's a PR or maybe a couple of forks that could work for 0.15. But there's no official release for BlendV for 0.15. I built something new if you're looking for something new. I don't know if you're trying to upgrade an old application or what you're actually looking for. But yeah, BlendV currently is, the maintainer is dealing with life stuff. They had a kid at one point, so that's all that's going on, and they're raising a kid. So eventually they'll come back to the project and presumably update it to whatever Bevy version is around at the time. But in the meantime, I have my own thing that I'm using. Okay, so this built. And we are... Do I have to go back and look at the GitHub page? I hope not. One of the things that we need to look at is mesh uniform. Mesh uniform, we probably don't need to look at the actual... Oh, this looks more intense. Interesting. Let's hit the blame on mesh uniform. Let's hit the blame and never scroll again on GitHub. So mesh uniform new. Does new not exist anymore? Let's check the code. Mesh uniform new. Transforms first vertex index binding slot. Transforms first vertex index none. And mesh instance mesh asset ID. I really don't like news with more than 3 arguments. That's what I'll do. Let's go to docs. Let's go to docs. Let's go to RC5. Let's go to mesh uniform. Nope, not mesh 2D uniform, mesh uniform. Mesh uniform is all of this stuff. Maybe I open this in a new tab as well. The thing that changed here is it got a current skin index. It is... Oh, that's the padding change, I feel like. Okay. Some padding changed. The mesh tag is now there. The light map, bind group slot, and the current skin index. And if we look at the new function, it was supposed to take mesh transforms, first vertex index, and maybe light map UV rect. We actually don't care about any light for the use case that we are currently using. So I think I optionally called that none previously. So material bind group slot is new. And my question is that just a move of... What is this function? This function is get batch data. Does this also get batch data? Does it get full batch data? So get batch data for the pipeline. Then builds the whole thing. So I wonder if we should transfer to doing that. Tag being 0 here feels really weird. Like really, really weird. Is that not what I think it is? I thought that was supposed to be the mesh tag stuff. So I think that if we switch to mesh tag, we'll have to revisit that. That's fine. This implementation, if I can remember correctly, is not an implementation that is like super important for our like use case. Basically, we're trying to, oh my God. I literally cannot use, is there like a raw text view of this that I can use, I guess? I want the blame, but the blame interface is just so bad. So this logic here is like fundamentally not interesting logic for us. The thing that we're doing with this custom render phase is basically just taking the mesh instances that already exist and saying, hey, we want to use those. So I think that this is just going to be a straight up copy paste for us, if I'm being perfectly honest here. Render mesh instances, render mesh, render assets, mesh uniform. Like this is all just exactly what it should have been anyway, right? Like this is, ooh, the only difference is this mesh allocator. I don't think we were using mesh allocator before, right? Maybe we were. Yes. So this is mesh allocator vertex slice. And the new code uses mesh allocator mesh vertex slice. With the mesh asset ID. What is the issue with this one? One of the things we didn't do that I said we should have done earlier is we didn't go through the PRs and read them. I got distracted doing something else. Get batch data not satisfied because we have this one error. And this one error is because you don't leave a door unlocked because mesh vertex slice cannot infer type. That's interesting. Type annotations needed. Type annotations needed for first vertex index. Is that because we throw this away? Nope, we use it right here. That's interesting. Mesh allocator vertex slice with the asset ID returns a U32. Mesh vertex slice I want to look at. This takes the asset ID of the mesh and returns the buffer slice. Yeah. All of my problems are copy paste problems today, apparently. Thank you. I appreciate you. I really do. Well, shoot. I'll start replacing it in here before I copy it. That explains why we needed, because the mesh allocator comes from the system param, yada yada. This is linked to a bunch of shit. Okay. And the system param here, the implementation has to be for that, yada yada. Okay, so this is all good. I think that this tag was probably just declared to be not useful for the demo that they have in the repo. I think that when we actually go to use this tag, this is probably not 0 in the actual repo, right? If I look for mesh uniform, and what are the chances that GitHub search will work if I do mesh uniform and tag? So here's the example with tag 0. And That is absolutely just overriding whatever would have been there. Actually not used in any other class. Interesting. That doesn't seem right. I feel like I'm just missing matches here. Yeah, what I wanted to search for is tag in the middle of stages. Count that. GPU pre-process doesn't sound like that's going to be it for us. I don't see any usage of this. PBR render mesh tag impl. Show me more of the matches, I guess. I think in the future, what I'm going to do is just move further and further away from using GitHub. This used to be such a useful website, and it just has degraded over time. So interesting that I feel like I can't find a usage of this, because I would have expected it to even just be passed through somewhere. This is PBR source render mesh. Of course, the search doesn't work. It can't possibly be this bad for everyone. This has to be like a my computer thing, right? I mean, it's the only site that's doing it to me. So like whatever, but in any case, having GitHub troubles today. So get full batch data for section texture pipeline is the next piece. This is going to turn into just main entity. We don't use the regular entity at all, so it doesn't matter to us. I think this is going to be the same change for a couple of these. But what I'm going to do is make sure that the code that is written here, so get full batch data, for example, is returning what I think it does. And I think that this got added to a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to remember get full batch data that, wow, this is decent. I am going to remember that this is supposed to be section texture pipeline by forcing the type error by hitting enter there. And then these are all basically just going to be copy pasted. Like the thing we're doing here is exactly what the other code is doing, right? We have no differences. We are trying to use or reuse like the mesh 3D data. Right? We aren't trying to do anything special. We're not trying to inject our own metadata. So this demo or this example in the Bevy repo actually works really well for us for tracking what we should actually update. This is one of the things that I actually do for other things as well, right? If you base the code that you write on an example in the Bevy repo, that gives you a really solid leg up for determining what actually changed in the example and then porting it to your own code. In this case, we basically have a bunch of boilerplate, which is fine. But in other cases, it's a good launch off point because then you can see what actually changed, investigate it, and then decide what actually needs to change for you. So in this case, extract camera render or extract camera phases. I don't think there's any special code here either, right? Insert or clear. This is whether we're trying to render stuff into this view. Insert or clear entity. This is render entity, which I feel like is the thing that changed. Cameras extract entity. Yeah, so entity camera. Isn't mesh uniforms written to the mesh allocator? Yeah, I believe it is these days. Or I believe it is these days for things that are like in Bevy. The uses will be of mesh allocator where? What do you mean? In this demo, in this example, in this shader code, we actually don't actually interact with the mesh allocator all that much. Render command P for draw mesh. I don't think we need one of those. Render command P. Yada, yada, yada. I don't think so. Because, like, we don't need to recreate draw mesh, I guess. What's the most advanced animations feature in Bevy? Is it possible to blend between multiple animations, etc.? Animation blending is, yes. Additive blending is so you can have a base pose and base your animation off that base pose. I know there are people converting Maya animations into Bevy and using them. I guess it wouldn't be much more advanced than that, I guess. There's an animation graph and you can work with all the low level stuff. I think I don't know what the scale of advanced on top of that is, but animation is implemented, as Hikasu says, or blending, sorry, both additive and non. What was I looking at? We don't need to change any of that. That's all what I was pointing out. Prepare the textures. Now we need to look at the things that are live, is what we were looking at before. So this is camera phases, because effectively what we're doing is taking all of the things that are in the world, all of the meshes that exist, taking those and trying to render them to a texture that is the size of the same camera that we're using. Right? Like we don't want to render this texture for like a camera we're not using, for example. So that's what this is. This is checking to see what should be in that set. And that function was called extract camera phases. And the changes here were the extraction uses entity and camera now. And we have render entity and camera with has sections pass or pre-pass, which is interesting. Because they're just looking for a camera 3D. So was there a change in the way that this works? Or does it not matter? Live entities, 4 main entity and cameras. There was talk about getting rid of the camera is active. That hasn't happened yet. Retained view entity created from the main entity. So we have main entities and render entities. You can get the render entity, so to speak, from the main entity. I guess one thing that I don't... One thing that I actually don't understand here is I think by main camera, they don't mean like main camera. They mean main world camera. And then phases, insert or clear, and live entities, insert. So we have live entities, insert, and we have insert or clear. And I should have added a comment. I should have added a comment here. I don't think this is necessary. I'm curious. Oh God, this isn't even going to get me to the right. Extract camera phases. Why does this not work? Extract camera. How does it not find? Oh, this is a custom phase item. That's fine. This is so frustrating. Custom or extract camera phases. Okay, there we go. Extract camera phases. Hopefully this won't scroll 5 pages. I feel like this got changed in the PR and I'm not sure why. Wow, GitHub is being real slow today. I wonder if they broke something. Minor cleanups. Definitely minor, just some renames. PR. Simplify node. This is the view node. Check viz, rename some stuff, work in progress docs. Update to main, maybe. Index stuff. Indirect parameters. Yeah, okay. Here, entity, main entity. So it happened before this. I wish the git blame worked better. Try VS Code with the Git Lens extension. Maybe. I will look into things later. This is really the first time that GitHub's been so bad for me that I've had to try to like manually go find things and whatnot. I also know that I have a very powerful Git tool. I'm an Emacs user. I use Emacs for all my scripting and stuff, and I used to use it for code before I started making more videos and stuff. So I have access to Maggot. or Magit or whatever you want to call it, which is actually really fantastic as like a Git UI. It's just like that kind of thing is confusing for everybody else to look at too. So I'm hesitant to use things that are power user tools, because if I'm using Magit to find things, then I'm not showing a process that other people can replicate. Query entity camera. What I really want to figure out is like this changed at some point, this file specifically. And for some reason, I thought it was relevant at some point in the past to remove entities if the section's pre-pass wasn't on the camera. And I didn't leave a comment as to why, so I'm trying to retrace my steps a little bit to understand why I made that decision at the time. Because I could just do this, right? And then the upgrade is straightforward because it's basically just this logic. But I made a change and I wanted to understand why exactly. And I made the classic mistake of not having done this, not having, how do I frame this? Not having commented my code, which is a fairly rare mistake for me at this point. The cameras change. Local hash set retained view entity. Right, like this. Why did I feel the need to label that? I think I felt the need to label that because I only wanted to operate on cameras with it. But I don't think that matters. We'll see. We'll see what the issue is here. This could end up being like a moment of, oh, right, that's why I did it. But for some reason, I can't remember why I would remove it there. All right, we've got the phase, the dead views. No, I do remember. Actually, I'm remembering right now because we don't want to render. Yes, because I do want to filter it out. This is actually very important. Sorry, it took me a second to remember why I did this. This is actually really important because if we don't do this, then we're not filtering for like the camera view that is only going to render to our render target, right? This will be for everything up to and including like the current camera, if that makes sense. So I think this will cause, if we don't have that, this will cause the other camera phases to also run this logic. So main entity camera and cameras. And then I named this sections prepass. Let's rename this to has, I guess. Import this. This is not what we want to insert anymore. This is fairly straightforward. I'm not going to use the word they used there. I'm going to use the word that I used for my own. This needs to happen in that loop, but I should have written about this when I did it. I really should have written about this when I did it. We're getting the entity for the retained view, and we are inserting sections pre-pass if it's supposed to have it, which I feel like should already be extracted. I don't know why I chose to do it here. That's the issue. I didn't comment my code. Comment your code, kids. So this, that's probably a clone issue. Right, insert or clear, not a clone issue, so I don't know what that issue is. We'll look at it in a second. Retain all of the ones that contain it. I think that logic hasn't changed, but retain camera entity. Phases probably changed its function signature. View sorted render phases. View sorted render phases. Section texture phase. That doesn't look like it changed. I don't know why this is an issue. This is a shared reference to the retained view entity. This is a shared reference to the retained view entity. I'm not sure why this would be an issue. Maybe I mistyped something again. I've done that once already. Expected entity found retained view entity in insert. Here, live entities is this, which is this entity hash set, which changed. This was a hash set of retained view entities. That's why. Hash set needs to come in from Bevy Platform Collections hash set now. So a bit of a piecemeal upgrade to this function because I'm trying to remember why I wrote some logic. This, I'm just going to comment this out for a moment and we're going to revisit it when it breaks. That's what's going to happen there. Because in the meantime, we still have some simpler upgrades to do. So the section texture phase, this is what they call the stencil 3D, if I remember correctly. And this is for Q custom meshes. I know rendering code is super, super fun to watch get upgraded. Especially when I can't remember why I wrote something specifically. That should be good. We have indexed in our struct now, so we need to include the indexed of the mesh. That is a mesh like data property. Not something that we control. We're just trying to use whatever somebody gives us. This looks like it probably changed to not be a view entity. So let's queue custom meshes over here and go find out what that entity now is. This would be custom render phases, retained view entity. That's in view, view and views. This is extracted view, render visible, and MSAA. Extracted view, render visible, and MSAA. So this is the entity. I think that I named that view entity. View entity, view visible entities. So this one's a view now? That doesn't feel right. Views, view.retained view entity. That's what it wants. This is one of those main world retained view things. So we don't need this anymore, and we don't need this. And that will use the render world entity. Getting through this little by little. I think, let's see, 790 is what we just fixed. So I must have passed, yeah. So here's the start of our current errors. Retain view entity borrow on 863. This is in the view node implementation. So this is part of the render graph. This is the node that gets inserted basically. Section phases get view entity. Why did I leave this here? I don't know. View node. Yeah, just view.get retained view entity. So it's just a change out of the entities. That's not what that is anymore, is it? Graph view entity. That's not what we use here. We use view from query item, so camera view target. That has changed, interestingly. So run for them. Graph render context, camera view target. That's defined by this associated type up here, and the world. So they're expecting extracted camera, extracted view, view target. Extracted camera. Do we need depth? I feel like depth is weird here. Depth is here. Oh, no, we do need depth. We definitely need depth. We need depth because they don't use depth because they're doing a really simple example kind of thing. We need depth because we're trying to order all of these meshes. And if we don't use depth, then we don't actually get like a correct ordering of all of the elements in the scene. So we need that. We need the section texture, and then we need the extracted view. Was that the right thing? Let's see. Yeah, extracted view. View, and then view is used to get the phase. So I will add this here, right in the middle. Right, view here, and then view, when we go to get our phase, this is going to be view dot retained view entity. Getting closer. And then I think we have one more error. 947. Section phases contains key entity. This is probably going to be the retained entity thing again. Let me check to the prepare section textures. I don't know that this is going to be in here. This is prepare section textures. This is the textures we use for rendering to. So sections, phases, contains key entity. Probably not what we want. We probably want view retained again. I'm kind of not entirely convinced, I think. That feels like the change that we're making in a bunch of very similar places, but trigger entity, this is all in main.rs. So we have improved to having application code issues. So trigger.entity becomes trigger target. And then we're doing a bunch of like manual setup here. Cool. We are getting a crash in expecting the resource to exist. That's the section texture pipeline. Batch and prepare sorted render phase for the section texture phase with our pipeline. And the section texture phase mesh uniform doesn't exist. So that is going to be in lib. And that is going to be a check in plugin. So we are init resource on our generator. In the render app, we init a couple of things here. We need to go check to make sure that we are initializing everything that needs to be initialized. So specialized mesh pipeline, draw functions, and view sorted render phase. Specialized mesh pipeline, draw functions, and view sorted render phase. And then our section data bind groups. These are because we're using a texture and things like that. And the error that we're running into is batch and prepare sorted render phase for GPU pre-processing. Wow, I'm not working well with the words today. Failed validation. So it's a resource for phased batched instance buffers. I don't think there's a direct mention of this in this code. There sorted render phase plugin with render flags. Is that a new thing? I think it is. So we've got the extract component for draw whatever, right? Which means that we've got our extract component for draw section. That's expected. We've got an extract component for section group ID. That's our ID generator. This is also our ID generator. This is our ID generator. But now there's this new thing. So we'll go look at the PR for this in a second. Sorted render phase. And this needs to be section texture phase, I think is what we called this. This needs to come into scope with debug flags. And I'm just going to try to run the application again, see if that is the only thing that needed to change. It is not. So post-process 185. Post-process 185 is a look for this section texture. So I think we're not creating the section texture. We can, in main, turn the post-process off. We're not going to see anything because the post-process is what applies the section texture and does the outlines. But just to make sure the rest of the application is actually running before we try to debug this specifically. This is saying section texture dot sections. Section texture here is a 1, 2, 3. The section texture for us sections is our color attachments. So sections must be none here. Dot length or something. Iter length, whatever. Iter count. None of that matters. So it is 0 for sure. I feel like it shouldn't be. Let me go check the PRs that have modified this. Not custom phase item. Don't want history in here. Shader. Custom render phase. History. And then we don't care about the Bevy platform rename. Retain skins frame to frame sounds like the wrong thing. Split out the indirect parameters metadata into CPU and GPU populated buffers. Fix a panic is an interesting one to look at. Let's pull this out completely so that we start a new thing here, because I'm going to start looking at some of these. Add user supplied mesh tag. I guess let's do this in time order then. Let's do this PR, this PR. This PR is probably the first one we're going to look at. This PR, retain skins, and this is basically everything that could have affected our demo for the most part. I think the thing that we're missing is the actual section texture itself. So there could be a mix-up in terms of which entity we're using to fetch the thing that we're looking for. This is exactly the error we ran into, actually. So we needed sorted render phase with the debug flags. That's the same thing we added to fix it. So this is where that fix came for our panic, the panic we saw earlier. And it was broken by build batches across phases in parallel. And there was some code that I think was not working anyway that got fixed that then triggered that panic. So all things considered, I don't think that these PRs are substantially affecting the behavior here. I think that the section texture here, when we run this view node, view target, post-process settings. We are trying to access the section texture via query. Yes, view query. section texture. And I think that if we go look for this code, this doesn't work because it expected the actual entity. That was sick. This is entity does not exist error. So we've got our camera extraction for the live entities. If we have the prepass, we insert the retained view entity. We only insert the sections prepass. In this case, the panic we're getting is that this entity doesn't exist, which makes sense. Because I don't think we should be accessing it like this. So the question is, what do I need to do to fix this? The section texture effectively doesn't get the attachment created, is the issue. So we get the section texture, right? Section texture is these sections, these attachments. Let's look for sections because I think that'll be easier to find. Right? Commands, entity, insert, section texture, sections, this, right? This code effectively never runs for the thing that we are working with. So prepare section textures is the issue there. Let's make sure this is even running. Let me, right, just start narrowing it down to something specific. This should crash again. We do make it here, which is good. I think the thing is we're not making it here. If that's the case, then we've narrowed it down to inside of this function. It is not. We do get here, and we do the insertion. So that means that we need to check this. This is what? Cached sections texture comes from the prepass. So the prepass could conceivably be empty. The prepass is the view sorted render phases section texture phase, which makes me feel like it's not empty. We don't hit this continue. This is where I put the to do for the check. So maybe it should be continuing in certain places and it's not. We only have one camera. That camera has the section texture prepass on it, right? Sections prepass. Texture here, cached. I don't think this debugs. Yeah, so we need to do like is some, because that'll be an option. Hopefully that is full. It is not. So let's leave this here and go check this. So section textures for the camera target, or it's obviously not inserting, because if it was inserting, then it would exist, right? So prepare section textures does not insert. So gets something, right? This returns something. Which means, well, I think it returns something. Let's do sections prepass. Prepare section textures, false. So we don't make it here. Section textures seems empty. Or section prepass. Which is interesting. I don't think this is debuggable. Maybe it is. Entity camera view MSAA, entity camera view MSAA, sections prepass. So I think it's that back to that insert, right? Sections prepass here, false. So it's all the way back to what was it? Insert if. So the original intent of this was to insert sections prepass if it needed to be. Is any part of your Skein workflow automated? For you, you have to export manually and rerun your game. Is there a better way right now? You can enable file watching in Bevy. That's the file watcher feature. The caveat being that hot reload for transform positions doesn't work. So it may not do what you want it to do, but that is a bug in Bevy's asset handling right now. That is not related to like Skein. So conceivably that could be fixed. That is not this one, not that one. Not system reloading. I think it might be this one. I think that's this issue. 18358. Sounds right. Yeah, this is the one. Jan's on this. Relevant for Blenvy, absolutely. Hikasu's on this, bisected to a specific commit. That's Bevy asset v2 commit, which is, you know, yep. Issue only happens when you modify a transform. That is correct. So if you change things like textures, this will reload, I think. If you change things that are like transforms, then it won't. No fix got into 0.16 that I'm aware of. This might fix it. I don't know. I don't know if it will, but I have an issue on Skein pointing to that. So when it comes down to it, hot reload for GLTFs for moving things around kind of broken in Bevy right now. There are things that will hot reload, enable the file watcher to get access to those. From the perspective of exporting from Blender, I don't think that I've found a way that I'm happy with for the moment. I think that what we're going to end up doing is writing a little bit of functionality to do like export on save, basically. And then we'll save that into a text block inside of your blend file. And that will use that configuration to trigger the export that you want to trigger. Basically, we're just going to recreate. Hopefully we can template this out, but we have to recreate this configuration and then save that. That's going to be really annoying. I would really love to avoid doing that. I can't find a way to avoid doing that. Let's see. E, I think, is what I tried to do last time. So if I hit E, nothing happens, right? We can get to this menu with a hotkey, but let's click on the dump just so it goes somewhere else, right? Like I can hotkey bringing up that menu, right? If you go here and you hit assign shortcut, you can hotkey bringing up the menu, and then you can hotkey this button. So you can double hotkey, right? You can hotkey opening the export and you can hotkey confirming the export. But as far as I can tell, there's no hotkey to actually do the whole thing. So you have to hit two keys. What you've done is you set a Python script that watches the blend file and then reruns the export on the command line when the file changes. It's not the greatest, but it works for you. Yeah. You can do that so we can do that inside of the add-on, right? And that's what I was talking about earlier. So Blender, Python, hook, blend hook or something like that. Blend hook. Blend. I don't want to load blend. Forget what this function is called. Persistent application handlers. Blend. So there's blend imports, loading. Is there save? Yeah, there's save. So we use one of these already, so that whenever you load a new blend file, we can load in the schema and create all the types. The thing we can do is basically take that export menu, turn it into configuration, and then trigger on save post whatever you set up there. I think that if we do this inside of Skein, We will have a checkbox for whether to do it on save or not, because for some people, saving and exporting need to be separate because they have long export processes. But if we do this, then we should be able to hotkey the operator directly from Skein, and then you will have a one-click inside of Blender export button. I am not really sure why that doesn't exist already. But yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. If you want to do a full export, you can hotkey two things, right? Either you need to hotkey this, and then also this button, which you can totally do. And then it's two keys to export. Or you can hotkey export all collections if you're working with that workflow. That also works. It'll just trigger everything. I haven't seen a way to trigger like a collection exporter that is everything. I don't think you can set that up. But if you had like a bunch of multiple levels or something, you could do it that way. And then I think what we'll end up doing is actually adding a feature to Skein that just exposes that so that you can have one-click GLTF export that is configured. I don't know why that doesn't exist already. One of the things they tried to get me to do was to make sure that everything was hotkeyable when I submitted to the extensions directory. But like you can't just trigger this as far as I can tell. You have to open this menu and then trigger this. So those are the options. Double hotkey bind for the export, or we do something with Python. We could also... we talked about CLI extensions earlier. Like you can write your own Python scripts to do this. Oh, what is this thing? I don't think I've seen this before. Yeah, they basically just have their own Python script and it's like, do this from a file. This is the Kronos group GLTF stuff. And then running Blender headlessly whenever the blend file saves is valid. You can totally do that. I think we should have a better workflow for it by default because everybody's going to want it. Yes, there is a... That's the other thing. I actually just had that up. So there's this. But then we have to have you set all of these settings because there's just fundamentally no way around people needing to configure it. Right. Like the... Do I not have Blender open anymore? I closed it, didn't I? Fundamentally, when you hit export here, this configuration on the right-hand side, visible, renderable, like selected, those are all things that you can configure. Active collection, active scene, those are options, right? You can limit it to whatever. Cameras, punctual lights. Some people will want cameras. Some people will want lights. Some people will want some combination of them. For data, you'll either want to apply modifiers or not. I like apply modifiers. I know some people like to, actually apply everything themselves. Tangents are required, but only if you're using forward decals. If you're not using forward decals, then you don't need tangents. If you have other random attributes, then you also need to click this attributes button. So for the outlines in my current game, for the Bevy 0 to 15 game, you need to export attributes because we texture paint or vertex paint an attribute. So really, we need all of that configuration. Um, because otherwise we don't know how to export. Um, I don't love the idea of recreating that. So really the thing for me is I would love to take the information from there or store it in that place so that your global export configuration is the same one that we would trigger. And then once we have an operator to trigger the export, which I'm not sure why it doesn't exist. It feels like something that should already exist. I was looking for the binding though, and I couldn't figure it out. And everything that comes up on the internet is like some weird spam that's like, go to file, edit, GLTF. So, I don't know. I haven't seen an operator that does the export. I guess technically this is one, right? But if we open Blender again, you still have to be able to key map it. So you would have to go to preferences, key map, GLTF, and then I can't find it, you know? Like, this feels weird, specifically because the people who review the extensions when I submitted Skein told me that everything had to be key mappable. And yet, exporting GLTF doesn't show up when I look for it. And that's like built in. Which is like, okay. There's no export. I don't know. I've tried to look for this. I've tried to search for it. I can't find it. Right? I don't know if exports just don't work like that or whatever. But we can definitely do the other thing where we could try to create a hotkey for it. All we need to do, ideally the least we would need to do is basically just call this function. Right? As long as we can call this function with the data that somebody has configured for all of these options, which are like so many options. I don't want to manually list all these out. I just want to like take the options from here and put them over there. If we can do that, then we'll have a key binding for an operator in Skein. I think that's the approach that we need to take. And then you can set that key binding to whatever you want. Interesting that apply modifiers prevents exporting shape keys. I actually didn't know that. But yeah, that's the TLDR. TLDR is we need to figure out a solution for that. If somebody wants to PR like a Python operator that is key mappable, that calls that export with the pre-configured whatever the user already chose, that would be really cool. Otherwise, I'll eventually figure it out and I'll add it. Right now, I'm working on the defaults. So that'll be something that I get to after the defaults. I was a little bit less worried about it because the hot reloading in Bevy itself is kind of broken, right? Which is also something we need to fix because hot reload being broken is like not something anybody wants. Mesh stencil phase plugin. This is their stuff. This is the sorted thing. So none of this is really relevant. Everything here is fine. The thing that I need to change in mine is I need to get this in, and I wonder if render entity even works here anymore. Because that's what we were using before. If that works, then I can put render entity here. Ultimately, am I aiming for hot reload or Bevy remote for live edits? Hot reload would be better. I think the question is, am I going to rebuild like a BRP editor inside of Blender? Or am I going to like rely on GLTF hot reloading for that functionality? I think there are two different use cases, first of all. I think that Bevy remote for live edits is like an experimental tool, if that makes sense. I don't know how applicable it would be to like move a cube in Blender and have it move inside of Bevy. One of the reasons for that is the communication path that we're using with Bevy currently with Skein is GLTF, right? That is the package and the payload for how a scene gets defined and like how one gets spawned in general. The way that the GLTF stuff gets packaged is not necessarily the same as it's represented inside of Blender. So you could end up with a bunch of GLTF files that represent individual collections inside of a scene in Blender. And we would have to know ahead of time that you exported those as individual GLTFs to be able to connect to them. And then at that point, you could be spawning, like say you like exported a tree via collection exporter to a GLTF, right? Then you use that tree, you spawn 10 of them, 50 of them, 100 of them, they're trees, you know, whatever. There is no way to connect to that, right? There's no way to take, well, there's not no way, right? We can say, hey, this thing is named tree, you used something named tree, we think it's the same thing. But that's not really deterministic. We could start attaching like UUIDs to stuff all over the place, like a special Skein ID or something, and then we could do an association for sure. But that also messes with, you know, whatever you want to actually do with your application. Also, the other thing that I would bring up is doing UI in Blender is really painful. So what's the description here? Let's see, VS Code, BRP editor, or like Bevy Inspector eGUI even, right? Bevy Inspector eGUI should have a screenshot of some kind, hopefully. So this panel from Bevy Inspector eGUI. How would we represent this inside of Blender, right? Just thinking about there's an entity list, there's resources list, there's an assets list, whatever, right? To render this in Blender, we have to have all of the reflection information, first of all, which we kind of do already for all the component data and stuff, right? We have to call BRP to get all the entities, right? We will have to call BRP fairly often to get an updated list of entities, which is fine. Hopefully there's some like subscription in the future, whatever, doesn't matter. We end up with all of these entities. Doing nested UI in Blender is a non-starter, being perfectly honest. Doing these kinds of nested lists is, I don't want to say it's basically impossible, but it's really painful. If you want to start doing data that is like, here's a collection of a bunch of entities, all of these entities can have different components, etc. Blender's property-based data model doesn't handle heterogeneous arrays. So in this case, what we would end up doing is, and what we actually do in Skein right now, is all of the components get pulled into one giant property group. And then we have to use like a type selector to figure out which one is actually getting used. And we would have to do that for everything, for all entities. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you want a BRP style interface, if you want to modify things in game, I think building a separate BRP editor is the better route, right? Scoping wise, not only is this like incredibly painful to do in Blender, but even if we were to do it, it's probably going to be a maintenance nightmare that requires knowing which version of Bevy you're using, right? Currently, Skein doesn't need to know anything about the version of Bevy you're using, which is really nice because it means that the add-on for Blender can just do what it does, and it works with 0.15, it works with 0.16, it should work with 0.17. So we can kind of like evolve the plugin and the add-on separately, and the Blender add-on doesn't need to like be a specific version for a specific Bevy version. So if you've got a project on 15 and a project on 16, the add-on works for both of them. That's a really nice property of the add-on that I would like to keep. I think that scoping wise, this doesn't make sense. Aside from just the technical feasibility of it. And when I think about BRP use cases for editing components and stuff like that, it doesn't feel like people will be running their application and modifying it in non-persistent ways, right? Because fundamentally, if you're doing BRP like component editing, the Bevy editor obviously will have a view into your actively running app and be able to modify things and save those scenes out. But we don't have a scene representation to save out like that. The Bevy editor is waiting for BSN. We have GLTF and the blend file, right? So to some extent, if we can map the scenes one-to-one and you want to move a cube while you're in game, we could theoretically implement that. We can listen to the transform changes in Blender. We could try to find something inside of Bevy that looks similar, and we could build the infrastructure to like make that mapping, but I'm not sure it's actually worth it. Right. It feels like a lot of infrastructure buildup for something that could be done differently. Like if you built a Tori app that used BRP to talk to any Bevy app or whatever, I feel like it's easier to build that to a better extent than it is to do this inside of Blender. And I'm not convinced. I'm not hard against it. I'm just not convinced. Okay, we've got this one more thing to do. I will say that anything that increases like the overall maintenance burden of Skein, like anything that risks it being able to upgrade from 16 to 17 is something that I am very skeptical on. I have a very high bar for including features into the code base. The one thing that I don't want Skein to do is the thing that Blenvy is currently in the situation of, where it's like people committed to it in 0.14 because it's a good, useful thing. In 0.15, they kind of had to like figure out their own solution. A lot of people are still stuck on 0.14 because there's no official release. And now 0.16 is here, and they all have to think about using different editors because Blenvy hasn't updated. I think that that is the worst case scenario for Skein. And I intend to avoid that at all costs. And doing things like building out BRP editors inside of Bevy, or this is the other reason that we don't have, that we didn't implement cross GLTF references in Skein. Because if we do that, we have to build effectively BSN and build on top of that inside of Blender. And there's no spec for cross GLTF references that is merged into something like Blender. So we would have to take a spec that hasn't been implemented by Bevy, by the Kronos GLTF group, or by Blender, and then implement that in all three places. And that is just so much to do. That will depend a lot on whether BRP API will be consistent across versions, right? You're talking about being able to upgrade. There's already changes between 15 and 16 in the BRP API. So that I believe the BRP API for 15 and 16 already broke. I haven't checked it myself, but I saw some people talking about it. I feel like people who contribute to Bevy like to rename stuff. GLFX, not his format, by the way. GLFX actually is a completely separate potential spec. GLXF is just a thing. It is not PC Walton's thing. PC Walton built the GLXF integration for Bevy that they use. But GLXF is actually its own thing. It actually is in Kronos Group. But this is not implemented by anyone. Right? Like Blender doesn't export this. And it also kind of competes with what BSN is trying to do. So, yeah. The specification documents in this repo are the original submission from 2022. There's feature exploration happening. It doesn't look to me like this got merged or like approved in any way. They're trying to create new replacement documents second half of 2025, so 6 months from now. Yeah, this is just like too early for us to look at, go, hey, we're going to implement it, especially with BSN around the corner, right? Like BSN is going to drop. BSN is going to presumably include GLTF references. At which point we could consider trying to do something to support BSN. The other thing is you could end up with a workflow where you do a whole bunch of work in Blender and then export a bunch of things as collections. And maybe we have a BSN exporter that is experimental of some kind, you know, TBD. BSN doesn't exist yet. I don't want to build it. I don't want to build a BSN competitor is kind of what I'm getting at, right? Like I don't want to build something that competes with where core Bevy is going, because then we have two things, right? And obviously the one that like should win, so to speak, is the one that is upstream. Like BSN should win out because we're trying to, as a community, build BSN into the thing that we need. We're not trying to have 5 different competing scene solutions. Okay, this looks like it was good now. So we fixed the render entity here and the retained view entity here are not the same thing. If they are the same thing, then they are wrapped differently in different types. I think that the way we kind of went through the upgrade of entity to main entity, render entity, and now retained entities and whatever, made some of this code kind of confusing. But all things considered, this code seems to be working. Let me get rid of some of those debugs that we had in lib, because they actually aren't relevant. We are getting the values that we expect to get here, and they are just really noisy because they run all the time. So let's run this. Edge detection. We still might have more issues, but we actually are getting the texture at least. Right? This is now 1, which is great. We don't see any outlines. So let's go into post-processing and see if we are even rendering this correctly. I don't know if I have File Watcher on in this example. I don't think so. I don't think I have it at the root. I should put it on. But it's fine. Texture load, fill values. So this is the actual texture itself. So if we get the texture, this should show red, and we don't. So that's our answer. Because if I return vec for 1001 and we rerun this, this post-process isn't even applying. Interesting. Did I remove the post-process? No. Did the custom post-process change in a way that is non-error introducing? I guess that's possible. That's not great if that's what's happening. I think this is going to turn into something that I need to dig deeper into. I only say that because we're about 20 minutes from my usual end time. The idea that this is not running at all is not great. Right? This should be red. The whole thing should be red, right? Unless everything is 0. Right? So all of this could get commented out. And basically the texture load here is, yeah, okay, that's the issue. This is all 0. Vec for 1, 1, or actually special 1 or 0, 0, 1, right? So this is nothing because I have a syntax error. This is what we're getting. We are getting 0. We're getting no data. We're getting nothing. So that could mean a couple of things. The thing that I think it means is that we don't have any items being rendered, which means that what is it? Live entities. It might be something like this up here. Return the UV first as a test. I could do that. I think the thing that we just changed, or just whatchamacallit, return vec for in.uv.u in.uv.v01. I messed up because u and v don't count. in.uv.x and in.uv.y. Here's the UV texture. Oh yeah. I have to say that I know that people use these shortcuts all the time. I find that without a language server, it gets really confusing as to what is what. Like what is a vec2, what is a vec3. I find reading GLSL code, for example, really tough. Because I never know what the type of anything is because everything coerces into everything. So I habitually expand everything. But yeah, here's the UV. UV working as expected, right? Like it's just there. Right now, the red channel of the texture that we were writing to is black. So that means we have no data. So this right now is if defing this. We could it's full screen phase. Yeah, it's full screen post process. Yeah, the post process part is not the part that's broken. The part that's broken is writing to the section texture and then using it, I think. because we aren't getting anything. I would hesitate to say that this is even running. Black texture says to me that this is not running. Which makes me feel like this is related. But I think that dropping this into Xcode and stuff is one of the things that I'll do next. I don't know that I really have time to. I think we can. I think we can drop it in. Let's drop it in. Let's make sure this is built. Let's open Xcode. I think I have a project in Xcode that already has everything set up. So I think I will be able to point this, if I can remember how to use Xcode, is the caveat. Edit scheme, edge detection custom phase. It's already pointing to it. It's not pointing to the right one. So we need to go GitHub, Rust Adventure, Bevy examples, which I think is inactive right now. Let's this is the root one. That's 0.10. Probably older than that. I don't know why I ordered this in terms of created date. That was a terrible decision. Here's the examples. Here's target, debug, edge detection, custom phase. Choose. Run. Actually, I think this will probably, oh, no. I think this will fail because I didn't specify the assets directory, but we'll take a look. So we can do debug, capture GPU workload. And now keeping in mind that I do think that I need to specify the assets directory. But even if I didn't, this was using edge detection before. If it's pointing at the old assets directory, it will use the old shader code, which is the same shader code. So we happen to have gotten lucky, effectively. Pre-pass, early mesh pre-processing, main opaque pass, section pass. Section pass. Looks like it's writing out. So the question then, this is the view depth. This is the pre-pass section structure. We're getting 0. So we're getting 0, but we are getting some depth, which is really interesting. Right? So this is totally black, as far as I can tell anyway. This is the depth texture, which is, it seems right. I can't zoom in on it for whatever reason, but well, it might not be right. I don't know exactly when I took the screenshot. I took it here. It's actually wrong, which is interesting. It's only the background cube. Also super interesting. The main opaque pass, which is this one, would show like regular stuff, right? So if we look at this stuff, we see, okay, this is drawing, that's drawing, right? This is picking out and drawing each of the meshes that come through. This is roughly what we should see when we are rendering our own pass. This is our own pass down here. But I feel like there are no render commands, right? Main opaque pass 3D does a bunch of stuff here. And this is what's being done in the section pass. So I think we're missing render commands here. The capture happened exactly when all models are entirely within the background cube. That is not true, actually. Unless it captured not at the frame that it's showing, which I can check, actually. Oh, you're right, it did. Let me get a better capture, because that is awful. What a capture. Either way, we still have our issue, but so now we don't. But the issue is definitely so the depth texture is here. And we don't really have anything else. So definitely an issue with potentially not having any of the render commands run. Right? Because if we were going to see what we would expect, we would see a bunch of this, right? We'd see a bunch of these. We would see the individual things rendering in like this. This is all of the, you know, set state, draw indexed, etc. Like these are the draw commands. We should be seeing that here, and we don't. So there's still something wrong. This is still claiming 11 draw calls. No, it's not. There's no way. Yeah. Feels really weird that the depth texture seemingly gets written to. I don't think we're reusing it, but I guess we could be from previous passes. We do also have 13 draw calls, so yeah, basically I have debugging to do. I'm probably going to do some of it here. I'm probably going to do some of it in Bevy. But we are running out of time to do it on stream, unfortunately. So I have some work to do in the changes that happened here. I don't think that the shader code would have changed. Right? Out.color.r equals 1. Let's just write that in. Right? And I'm not being silly. This is not like a 255 situation. Right? So this data doesn't look like it's getting written. Like this shader doesn't seem like it's being run, is kind of the vibe. So like if I comment this out, for example, which would make sense because we don't see any of the, I don't know when WGSL Analyzer got like a new formatter in it, but so yeah, I don't think this shader is running, which means that it's not getting correctly set up or whatever. So still some debugging to do. I'm going to go read some of the changes that have happened to this example, check some of my code. I don't think that any of the like texture setup code needs to change. I don't think any of the other stuff like that needs to change. I think that it will be an issue of choosing the wrong entity somewhere. That's what I think it will be here. So I've got to go through here and check some of the queries. I've got to make sure that I'm inserting onto the right entity. I've got to make sure that I have kind of updated all of my queries so that they're not like silently failing, things like that, right? But that is it for today. So this will be the last thing, and then the game is basically ready to go. Other than that, we got all of the other 0.16 changes. So I will fix this shader over the next like couple days. I have some Bevy videos to make, so I'm gonna do those. I've got the 0.16 video basically ready to go. And then next Saturday we will have this fixed. And I'll explain how I fixed it. But thanks for hanging out, everyone, and I will see you Monday for the next 0.16 updates for other things that are not shaders.